Welcome to another episode of the Coffee Break Podcast, where we share business ideas, practices, and strategies while we enjoy our coffee break. My name is Chad Lingefelt with Loc-Doc Security, and today our guest is one of our very own. We'll be sharing our coffee break today with Mr. Lucas Ward.
Hello, hello. Happy to be here.
We'll chat with him more right after this.
We got so much to say. We got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. It's time for a coffee break. Oh yeah.
Well, welcome aboard this morning. I did want to address one major issue that we were a few minutes late going live this morning.
Chad's fault.
Yeah, it's completely and utterly my fault. The espresso machine was not working properly this morning, and so we had to take a few extra minutes for a pour over so that we could have coffee for the coffee break, because that would be a travesty. So, but we're here. Everything's good. Everything's working, and it looked like the espresso machine was maybe on the mends.
Hopefully.
Left, so.
Otherwise, I'll be having some pour over myself later on.
Yeah, we'll have major issues. The thing got a workout yesterday. We had about 20 guests here yesterday, and I don't even know how many cups of coffee that we made yesterday. But anyway, hey Lucas, thank you for being here today.
Glad to be here.
For those of you who are not aware, Lucas is one of our team members here. He handles our app development. Been on the podcast a few times in the past.
Fourth time, I think.
Oh,
who's counting?
Yeah. So glad to have you back. Glad to chat with you. I think we've got a really cool conversation that has been building for a while.
Sure.
Talking about development types.
Yeah, I think we've touched on it here and there in a few previous episodes, but to go in and do a real deep dive is pretty exciting.
But before we do that, we do have a recurring segment on the podcast called Rapid Fire.
Yeah,
5 randomly selected questions to get to know you a little better.
Great.
Have you done Rapid Fire before?
Yes, I have, and it's as stressful as it looks.
Sweet. All right. Number 1, what is the weirdest thing that you've ever eaten for breakfast that is not breakfast food?
Leftover steak. Not that weird,
Yeah,
but
that's not strange.
strange to me because I typically eat a Nutri-Grain bar and half a bottle of water, exactly that. So to deviate from that at all, let alone to have some leftover steak, is pretty weird for my norm.
What is the strangest thing that your parents have ever done to embarrass you?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Well, I went on a cross-country trip, and when I came back from the trip 23 days later, they forgot to pick me up. So that was pretty embarrassing. And when I got there, they were like, "Oh, we thought you would call." And it was like, I didn't have a cell phone back then. And so that was pretty embarrassing, but not too bad. I still love them.
They just forgot about you.
Yeah, right. 23 days, you think they... Anyway, I better not say any more about that.
What's the last place that you'd be caught dead?
Ooh, a nail salon. I cannot stand the smell of nail polish, and those places, they're just a racket anyway, so.
What is the most random thing in your wallet?
Well, let's have a look. Probably. I have a Top Golf card. That's pretty random. I don't golf and haven't been since we went as a company, so my wallet tends to collect many cards over time and has to be purged every once in a while.
Awesome. All right, and the last one. What was your childhood crush?
My childhood crush. Well, when I think I was 11 or 12, I got a Shania Twain CD. And for whatever reason, I was enamored by her. So, I would have to say that was my childhood crush. I hate country and Western music now, so I don't know.
Hey, that doesn't impress me much.
Oh, God. Yeah. Okay.
All right, you passed. Good job. You scored 733 points. So congratulations on that.
That surely puts me in the lead.
It does. I'm not sure what the scores for the other guests were, but it's probably a new high score. Lucas has been with us now for, I don't know, I keep saying about a year and a half. That's probably getting close to 2 years.
October will make it 2 years, so a year and a half and a couple months, I guess, something like that.
Since the last time you've been on the podcast, you've had a couple of changes in your world.
Yeah, I had a baby, Everett Scott Ward, healthy little newborn boy, and I'm down to just one cat now, so that's a plus. Also changed domiciles to the Concord area, so I'm not sitting in that 77 traffic anymore. And now I'm the senior app developer instead of just the regular app developer, so...
So big things are happening.
Oh, yeah.
and in all honesty, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about today, and how a lot of this conversation has happened. So the big topic for today is we're going to be talking about different types of development methodologies. Is that a best way to
Sure.
to
Frameworks, methodologies.
And how we can apply that into business practices as well, because I don't want this to go too far off the rails where it's just all about app development, because that's not the purpose of the conversation. The purpose of the conversation is to understand how some app developers are using these methodologies and what business owners and managers and leaders can learn from that, and how they can apply that to their business is kind of the direction that I want to
Right,
go.
and I think it's becoming more and more common that separate industries are borrowing from each other for, methodologies, especially when it comes to business development. For as far as developing computer software, kind of historically there was this very rigid process, and it was a long process with many technical details being gathered up front, and that kind of speaks to how the software was designed back then. Now, with the onset of all the tools and the speed of development, new methodologies have been created. And in particular, of course, we're talking about the agile methodology, which has spawned in of itself many development frameworks.
So the two kind of recognized methodologies is waterfall and agile. One of the first, I feel like we had that conversation, and you probably explained all this to me a long time ago, but a few months ago, we were interviewing additional app developers because we're expanding that portion of our business. And one of the interviews asked the question, what method do you use for development? And it really kind of sparked a whole thought process for me of, hold on a second, this is actually a real thing. This isn't just something that Lucas was making up.
Yeah. I feel like we have moments like that a lot where I feel validated for sure. So thank you to whoever that interviewee was. But, there's kind of, when the Agile Manifesto was written in 2001, there was a lot of controversy surrounding it. The developers that participated and signed the manifesto, they wanted to not only improve their software development methodologies, but they also wanted to improve their kind of quality of life within their jobs. So to go from the rigid structure, the waterfall method, you start at the very top of the waterfall and you go down to the bottom. When you're at the bottom, you're finished. Maybe you return to the top if there's if you really miss the mark. To something like Agile, where you are constantly iterating, sometimes on a daily, or with extreme programming, you could iterate multiple times in a day. So I think, I kind of trailed off there. I don't remember what the original question was.
The original kind of concept was, they asked this question, and you responded with that you operate under Agile.
So, having some college graduates in here to interview them, if you say anything other than Agile or Scrum or Kanban, they're going to run the other way. Whereas, as I was saying, the kind of split and the controversy is, some older developers, some people that are more seasoned in the industry and worked with the previous technologies are still very much tied to the waterfall method with comprehensive documentation and contracts and all of that stuff. Whereas Agile seeks to kind of get rid of all of the bureaucracy and the hand waving and kind of just really get down to, hey, we're developing software here for the customer. We need to make sure that the customer likes what we're doing as we're doing it, not just as a finished project, because a lot of times what the customer wants changes over time.
Yeah. So one of the examples that I've kind of given and even heard of with this process is on the waterfall method. It's a lot of information being gathered up front in various pockets. Then people make decisions, and they work over a long period of time to produce something, and then they hand it over and present it and say, hey, this is what we came up with based off of our work. And then it's reviewed and people go, well, okay, this works, or this is not what we wanted. Right. And then you have to go back and start that process all over again.
And that's when the contract comes out and says, well, these were the specifications. And nobody wants to deal with that. That's not good business. And I think that, when you're doing the agile methodologies, you're revisiting those requirements, and as soon as you have working software, you're showing it to the customer.
Yeah.
And when the customer see, you may show them exactly what they requested, but when they have it in their hands and they see it, that could very easily change. They say, oh, this is exactly what I imagined, but now that I'm seeing it, I am kind of visioning something else.
Yeah.
And so, the framework, the methodology supports those quick iterations.
So an example of that, as we have been developing software here in our organization, learning from the development. So the original idea, the original brainstorm is this. We need, this particular process to result in this particular end result. But once you actually see it come to fruition, then you go, oh, I didn't know that was possible. Can we change and develop this additional result? Which I think is what you're kind of talking about, thinking through as you're presenting new ideas, it sparks. Or as you're presenting the idea that was originally requested, it can spark new ideas outside of that, which can change the course.
Right, and because of that, you never really land on a finished product. You constantly, new features are added every time that you meet with the customer sometimes. So, in the case here at Loc-Doc, we may be working on a part or a module or something, a slim piece of it. And once that's completed and seen, or at least the first iteration is, it may spark new ideas for additional modules. So it's not, hey, here's the requirements, get it done, it's finished. It's here's the requirements, this piece is done, this piece needs work, let's add a new piece here. And it's just a constantly evolving ecosystem.
Yeah. So understanding those two types of things, and I, again, from a listener or viewer standpoint, trying to, those that may not be into app development, understanding what that looks like. That's traditional product development is probably more of that waterfall where you hear about something, but you don't actually see it until 2 years, 3 years down the line. Mm-hmm. And then what you actually end up seeing may or may not fit the use case that you originally had expected, because a lot of other things changed over 2 or 3 years of time.
Right, and where that plays into kind of quality of life is, someone pours their heart and soul into a project for 2 or 3 years and then is told it's not what they wanted, you have to redo it, is a awful thing to hear. It's can be soul sucking. So to be in a group that is agile, that is using Scrum sessions to update requirements and things like that and give deliverables, then suddenly it's, you're getting fast feedback so you can correct where you're wrong, and you can also, have something to show for the work that you've been putting in.
So we were talking the other day about a lot of this, and you mentioned on the Agile Manifesto, and you originally heard about it through some of your college days. Tell us a little bit more about the purpose of that, the reason for it, where it kind of started from.
So when I initially went to college, I was learning very low-level languages like C. We were learning Java, and we were very much learning the waterfall method. And then my junior year in college, suddenly the curriculum had changed, and I could tell the professor in particular that I'm thinking of. It was a software development class. You could tell he was very frazzled. He was teaching something that maybe he didn't necessarily buy into, but all of us students, we read the Agile Manifesto. And this is in 2013 when the SaaS book, which is engineering software as a service, an agile approach using cloud computing, which is a horribly long name, but an awesome resource at the time. It was really the first cutting edge, like, hey, agile plus cloud frameworks plus continuous integration, and just brought together all the technologies. As students, we all really bought into it, and we're like, hey, this is something different. We haven't seen this. What we've been learning is seems very old school compared to this. And so, I definitely bought into it at that point, and kind of took it and ran with it. But there's a lot to be said to being able to kind of utilize the new speed of technology with cloud systems and web services with a fast-paced framework. If you try to apply waterfall to APIs and web services, it just there's no point.
By the time you finally get something to market, it's already outdated.
Yes.
And so, okay, the agile method is, give us kind of the basic structure, as it's not necessarily related to app development, just the basic structure of what it means.
Okay, so the Agile Manifesto really describes it best, and I have it written down here because I couldn't memorize it. But essentially, it's very short. It says individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. And then there's a caveat that says, although we value the things on the right, which if it's written down, that's processes, documentation, negotiation contracts, and plans, we value the stuff on the left more. So the human interaction, the working software, the deliverables, the collaboration with the customer, those things are what are valued. And it's really, it can kind of be looked at like a set of core values similar to what we have in our organization. It's, don't push contracts and provide working software and collaborate with your team and with your customer. That stuff's invaluable.
So how have we applied that here in Loc-Doc through app development, through the process of putting together a software that essentially runs our entire business, but does the dispatching of our service technicians, pricing, inventory, all of the things that it does? How have we utilized this methodology in that process?
So one of the things that really struck me when I first started, and I know you said this on the podcast a bunch of times, but y'all sort of gave me a blank slate and said go and run with it. And from the Agile Manifesto came 12 principles of agile software development, and one of them is to put good motivated people into an environment where they can do good work and measure their progress by working software, not by how many tasks that they've completed. And y'all have very, very much done that here. Whenever I started a course, y'all gave me the blank slate, which was a little scary, but I knew the agile methodologies, and so I kind of knew what I needed to do. I needed to get something working quick and fast, a minimal viable product, if you will, which would have been our first order workflow management system.
Yep.
And from that point on, just start collaborating with the team and, really putting the developer, and it doesn't have to be an app developer, it can be a business developer or manager, in communication constantly with the team, filling their stress points and trying to improve their workflow and processes. That's been very nice here. It's been a wonderful journey for sure.
So get the product together as fast as you can, get it into their working hands, and then listen to feedback.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that's really been the biggest learning thing from my perspective, kind of watching that, is once you get it into their hands, then seeing and watching how they actually use it changes how you respond to the kind of the next iteration, or how you make changes from that point. Because if you don't watch how it's being used, or if you don't listen to feedback of how it's being used, then you can quickly get off course.
Oh yeah, a lot of times what I think is best or optimized is very different than what the team actually needs. And so if you work 6 months on something and then give it to them and they say it's this is trash, then that again goes to that kind of spirit crushing
Yep.
soul sucking. So you're better off putting something working out there as fast as possible, constantly iterating, sometimes making updates daily or weekly. If something you want to just say, hey, well, we like to try this feature out, push it out and give it a try. And even if that's, a business practice, like, hey, we want to try keeping snacks in the hallway, and then, you get feedback like, oh, we don't like Captain Crunch, so, get Honey Wheats or whatever. I mean, that's seriously,
that's
you can apply it to Captain Crunch has been back there for weeks. You can apply it at any level in your organization.
So I'm sorry, that was hilarious. So with that said, thinking through the process, because there's also been in some of this development ideas that have come up. Hey, it'd be great if we did this. One in particular was, it'd be great if we could go ahead and put, which if I'm trying to keep this as generic as possible for those outside of our industry, but keying records. One of the concepts that we had was predetermining some keying records so that a technician could go ahead and select that easily without having to go through a lot of process. And we spent a little bit of time developing that and putting that in place, and then found out that it wasn't actually something that was useful.
Right. So, and sometimes that's an issue with, documentation or with training. But, something, that we thought would be a really great idea turned out to kind of be a broken process out in the field. And so what happened is, we didn't necessarily remove that feature because there was a few people that were using it and getting benefit from it. But we didn't necessarily go back and iterate over it and expand on it, because why waste time on something that is only being marginally used?
Yeah. So this is kind of the conclusion to this conversation, what really gets me excited is understanding those two different methodologies, and then stepping back and looking at business as a whole, how business moves, the speed at which business moves. So if you're thinking through the waterfall method and that's how you implement things in your business, then it is a lot of build up. It's a lot of trying to work through, gather information, document everything well, prepare everything well, present it, and then see if it actually works or not. And maybe you've got 6 months, a year invested in all of this prep work, and then find out it's not an actual viable process or solution or benefit to your business at all, and you just scrap it all.
Right.
So that would kind of follow that waterfall method, and we've all been there. And a lot of times I feel like in small business that you get started down that path and you never complete it because it's just overwhelming to start with.
Yeah, I mean, that's any project of any sort that is takes a year to complete is, that's an endeavor. And if it's something that is, not tangible, that's ephemeral, like a business process or a piece of software, then it can be really hard to kind of follow through to completion. The impulse to complete is very difficult with kind of the longer the planning process. Eventually you just get sort of lost.
Yeah.
So finding that starting point and then building off of it is a much better approach.
So then applying the agile method to business processes, we have an idea. What is the kind of the minimal that needs to happen to get it rolling to see if it is actually viable, and then tweak and adjust as we go?
So there's a couple of things there. The whole we have an idea phase, a lot of times it's one person in the organization that comes up with an idea. But if you are having multiple meetings, and not the big everyone get together and listen to one guy talk, but a face-to-face interaction with a few team members. Maybe the idea that you came up with involves them, or maybe y'all are coming up with ideas together. And what I'm describing essentially is a Scrum session, but it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a framework. It doesn't have to be a strictly followed thing. You can just get together with your team members and discuss fail points and ideas and visions, and then find some actionables off that. So from Agile came, Scrum and Extreme Programming, and these are all frameworks for executing ideas. So in the situation that we're talking about, you've come up with this idea. Well, the next step there is to say, how do we begin to execute on this? What are some actionables? What are some things that we can go and do today? And so you build what's called a backlog. You fill it up with all the things you need. It may not be in order, and it may not be as granular as it needs to be, but you get something down somewhere in a tool on a piece of paper. And then you have those frequent meetings and discuss, okay, what's been done? What needs to be done next? What's the priority? And it's not somebody saying, hey, this is the priority. Needs to be done. It's a collaboration where everyone is in agreement. And so those types of frequent meetings and that type of planning, if you're doing that, then you're already doing the Agile method, and you're already, on your way to a better methodology.
Yeah, it's one of the, and I've outlined this process before on a couple of videos, and we do it internally a lot, but outlining all of those things and categorizing them, what's broken that needs to be fixed, what's missing that needs to be added, what's complicated or confusing that needs to be clarified. And we go through that process and then say, okay, if we put all of our effort towards one of them, what's going to be the biggest benefit of our organization? And that's kind of, if you're working on a backlog all the time and identifying that, then you can go through it. So a applicable example of all of this is within the last, let's say 3 months, we did that exercise in one of our small group meetings. It was a collaborative effort. We said, okay, hey, we need. There's a lot of things that we need to work on inside of our organization, but we have limited time, limited ability. So let's start writing all of the things down that we need to work on. There was not a lot of structure behind it. It was write a thing on a piece of paper, a little sticky note, and we put them on the board. In the room in there, we said, all right, so just start lining them out, and then there were several that were similar, so we grouped those together, and then once we got all those on the board, then everybody in the room had, I don't remember what it was, 7 votes?
6 or 7 votes.
6 or 7 votes, and you could go apply those votes to, you could apply all 7 votes to one item if you were that passionate about it, or you could distribute them around 1 vote, 2 votes, whatever, on the different items. And then from that, we had the top 3, I think, that we brought together. And then from that, everybody was able to go vote again, and we created a priority. And so that was a prime example of a collaborative effort that said, is this, how do we get everybody on board with whatever it is that we need to work on? And the result of that was we had lack of documented processes, right?
Yes.
So SOP, standard operating procedures. We didn't have a way to keep track of all that. And the result of all that has been, for the past several months, everyone working in. So we went through and established, okay, first we need to have a format for standard operating procedures. That was a collaborative effort.
Yep, template.
Yep. Figuring out a template, figuring out how that process is going to work. Then once we decided this is a template, then we said, okay, let's start churning them out every week. Let's churn out every department, bring up document a process. So we started small, and then from that, and this is the kind of evaluation iteration process, is they bring it back on the next week, on the next Wednesday, present it to everybody, and then we poke holes in it or we ask questions.
Right, and that's been a very enlightening process, because it's one thing to create SOPs for people, but to have them create them for themselves to see how they envision their own process working, it puts a little bit of the power into their hands, but then it'll show you, hey, sometimes people are doing these crazy roundabout things that could be easily remedied, and other times it's like, oh, well, we had no idea that this was even being used in this manner. So, having those meetings and documenting those, lots of good is going to come from that, because we'll be able to create training manuals. We'll be able to onboard people quickly and essentially create kind of a turnkey style.
Yeah. Well, and I guess my point of all of that would kind of walk you through that process is we did that. We poked holes in it. Then we went back and cleaned it up and made it better, kind of always improving that process. And through it, we said, okay, well, where are all these things going to live? Where are all these documents, all this work that we're putting in, where's it going to live? And so then it went down a path of kind of evaluating a couple of different things for them to live. And my point of all of this is, had we gone back and looked at this from a waterfall standpoint, it would have been, all right, the end goal is we need to have documented processes. Well, we have to do all this research and figure out where we're going to put it, how it's going to be done, all this stuff. Meanwhile, we have documented 0 processes.
Right, and when you finally looked at the documented processes, there would be no chance to, hey, let's fix these along the way.
Yeah. So utilizing the Agile method in something as simple as that, we now have, I don't know what the number is, but at least a dozen, maybe more processes that are fully documented that we now can bring into a online system that any new team members, any existing team members can have access to and be able to utilize it for benefit for faster improvement going forward.
Right, and that goes back to the working software over comprehensive documentation. So, applied to something outside of software, working processes over comprehensive documentation. But that's not to say that the comprehensive documentation is not important.
Yeah.
It's just that get your process in place, get it working first, and then create your documentation. And you'll find that if you do that the opposite way, you're going to be doing a lot of double work, because then you'll be creating documentation to build a process, and you don't even know if the process is efficient or works yet.
Yeah. And I will say that, because I know I aggravate like folks like Levi in our organization, because I like to jump that process ahead and just say, just try to figure it out. And when there is already documentation to help us through that process.
Yeah.
But it's kind of that learning of applying it. Does it work? Does it fit? Does it fit the need? And then let's go back and tweak it and make it better over time.
Right, the iterations. And Levi's he almost came up with his own agile methodology, the AIM, which is analyze, implement, and modify. So that's really awesome that just kind of came out of thin air, or maybe he looked it up, I don't know. But it's just interesting to see people that are outside of the app developer and software development space buying into the agile methodologies. It makes my life much easier, because then I don't have to explain to people why we're frequently meeting or doing exactly what we're doing. And there's definitely been a lot of growth and improvement in various areas of the organization because of it.
Well, one of the things too that I want to add on this, because the thinking in the agile method versus a waterfall method or whatever, and how you're processing through that business, because that's been something that I think our organization has moved to over a period of time. It's not always been that way, but it's kind of moving more towards that direction. Understanding, I think, your core values or what your actual mission is a better starting point to be able to move that way. Because if not, if you don't really understand what your core is, then utilizing agile methodology is just going to be a scattered mess, because you're just going to be all over the place. But if you have some core to apply that back to and go, okay, is this where we need to go? Is this part of what we're about? Then it makes those decisions a lot faster.
Yeah, you can't just look at agile as a process that can be applied anywhere. It has to be a thought process change. It has to be bought into in its core level. The manifesto, it's basically a list of values, and if you try to apply the agile method without kind of initially investing in those core values and the culture, if you will, then you're gonna have some issues along the way, I would think.
Yeah. Well, I'm, and again, just processing all this as we're having this conversation, I think a lot of the agile methodology is. Some people may see it as flying by the seat of your pants type thing.
Sure.
And it is in some ways, but it also is a structure around it.
Right. A lot of times in software development, you are kind of flying by the seat of your pants. Technologies that you learn can change, a few days later, a few weeks later, and you're kind of always learning and always improving. But when it comes to business practices, maybe you set out to improve a particular business practice and you find that it was just fine how it was, and that's fine. So, just because you're always attempting to improve doesn't mean that you're changing just for the sake of change. You're just finding those improvements, and over time, the big things get fixed, and then suddenly your agile is just working on the small things. So it's, from the outside, it can look like that, but utilizing tools like Jira and Trello and sprint planning, there is some kind of structure to it. Yeah. But that structure in particular is meant to be, it's meant to easily change. So it's you still have a plan, you still are following some sort of path, but part of that structure includes the ability to respond to change quickly and easily. So, a question for you to kind of tie a bow on this conversation. People are listening to this, people are watching this and going, this process unnerves me. Like it rattles me to think that this is a thing. What is some advice that you would give, some way for people to try it out or think through that way, think through that process? I would say, don't knock it until you try it, of course. But if there's fear or, if you're getting anxious about it, it's probably because your company or your organization is already supporting too many bureaucratic processes. So, if you're saying to yourself, Tony over in whatever department he's not going to buy into this because he likes to really have a tight rein on his guys and be in charge, well, then that's where the core values change comes in. Having people in the right place at the right time to, inspire other people and to motivate them versus trying to, have a tight rein on things. It comes from a lot of trust. If you don't trust your people, then how are you ever going to let them get in a room together and have meetings and make real decisions that could affect your business? And you can sit in on those meetings as a business leader, but with the caveat of, my input is equal to, if not less than, the input of my teammates here, especially if it's something that they specialize in and you don't. And I think that, you have to buy into it at that core level. And if the fear is coming from, individuals in your business that don't buy into it, then maybe it's time to sit down and have that talk with them.
Very interesting information. Thank you very much for sharing the concept. I know this process has been majorly beneficial in our organization to see how it's allowed us, and I mentioned this in a meeting yesterday, it's allowed us to move at a higher rate of speed and ultimately get I feel like a better product overall in a lot of things that we do in app development, but it's also rolled over into other business processes. It's the concept of, you know what, that sounds like a good idea. Let's try it and put a timeline on it to see if it works. If it doesn't, then we can adjust and or scrap it. But if it does, then let's make it better, continual. So I really like the thought process on that. So with that said, thank you very much. For more information on Lucas, you can check out our website, Loc-Doc.net/app. APP is going to tell you a lot of everything that you've been working on.
See some cool videos, some demo videos, some screenshots, and some different stuff regarding the opening management system.
And we've got more of that stuff coming very, very soon, so keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. In the meantime, for those of you who are listening or watching for the first time today, we have got tons of episodes available. We are coming into our first full year of doing this podcast every Tuesday at 9 a.m. So we have close to 50 episodes that are online and available for you to download. So be sure to go check that out. Loc-Doc.net/podcast is where you can subscribe, you can listen, you can watch all of the podcasts that we've done up to this point. I would ask you, for those of you who are watching or listening, make sure if you are listening on any of the podcast platforms, please rate the podcast, comment on it, give us some feedback. It'll help us to reach a bigger and larger audience over time, so more and more people can get access to some of the information that we are sharing. We feel like we're trying to bring value for your business, value for your operation, and so we would encourage you to like, comment, share on whatever platform that you are watching or listening on. Next, we've got another exciting guest that will be joining us, so be sure to check us out next Tuesday, 9 a.m. right here on Facebook, YouTube, our website, Loc-Doc.net/live, and Periscope. We're everywhere that you want to be. That's a good... is that somebody else's slogan? That's Visa or something, MasterCard. Anyway, check us out for the Coffee Break Podcast. We'll see you next Tuesday. To learn more about the topics discussed today and to connect with us online to hear all of the episodes available, visit Loc-Doc.net/podcast.
We got so much to say. We got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. It's time for a coffee break.
The Coffee Break Podcast is brought to you by Loc-Doc Security. We'd love to connect with you online on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Just search LOCDOCINC.